You guys all ready?
Yep.
Call the meeting to order. This is the March 3rd Yellow Springs Village Council meeting. We're starting at 6 o'clock. Judy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Wintrow.
Yes.
Asplin.
Yes.
Sorry. Sims.
Here.
Ouch.
Yes.
McQueen. Also present are Finance Director Melissa Van Zandt and Chief of Police Anthony Pettiford and Interim Village Manager Kent Bristol.
Thank you. So we have two ways we can handle this. We can either, this is a proposal I kind of threw out there over the weekend. As we intended and as the agenda is written, we were basically going to start at 6 o'clock and run through the regular agenda. Something I threw out over the weekend was the possibility that we spend this first hour just talking about the budget and then do the legislation, the budget legislation during legislation where it would be on the agenda.
I don't have a problem with that. I think as long as I suspect that's why most people are here, so I think it's probably fine.
To go ahead
I mean,
and
we'll still be talking about it in the regular meeting
Right,
time in case there was any confusion.
So, it sounds like that's what we'll do. We'll just start talking about the budget, and then we'll pick up, we'll pick up with the other things when we're done with if we feel like we're getting done. So, Melissa, we do have a lot of new paperwork in front of us, so maybe we should start with you kind of describing and making sure we're all looking at the right things.
Yeah. Just so everybody kind of knows what happened today, I had talked to Brian and I had talked to Karen and we had kind of changed the game plan, so that's why the information that's in front of you is different from what was uploaded on the packet on Friday. So what we should have is the very top sheet should be the updated general fund budget. It should have a date of March 3rd on the very bottom of it.
Wait, which?
The general fund
Oh,
budget
that-
should
I'm
have a
sorry.
date of March 3rd.
Yes.
There should be a expanded public safety budget, which should have the date of March 3rd as well. That was not emailed, that was printed right before I came up here because I knew that it would be useful. And then special revenue and enterprise funds budgets should both have a date of March 3rd on them.
Did we get hard copies of those? They're smack right in front of you.
Yeah.
Should be right in front of you.
They're the documents you just had your hand on, aren't they?
This is the general fund budget, 5 pages.
That's not what I just gave you.
We just had one copy of that, so that's right here.
Yeah, I put a little stack that should have been just right in the middle of your giant pile of
I
documents.
guess we're sharing
Yeah.
Are they sharing?
No. It was there.
it. I have a lot of old ones, but they're in.
So after the special revenue and enterprise fund budgets, we should have a one-page document that's titled Village of Yellow Springs 2014 Budget with Fund Balances, Operating Expenses Only. It's got a blue bar across the top of it. And then we should have a capital budget with a date of March 3rd as well.
Okay.
And then there should be two versions of the ordinance. There should be one that has, what happened to mine now?
I just swiped it for you. I just swiped it for you.
The ordinance.
Oh, no. I didn't put it.
There should be two copies of the ordinance. One is serving as a worksheet and the other is just a plain, a regular formatted ordinance with a total of $8,427,070. So the ordinances with those balances at the end should be the ones that we're working off of. The other one had capital improvements in it, and I removed the capital improvements, updated all the other funds to reflect changes.
So wait,
It's in case we make changes tonight.
I mean, what does it look like? 'cause I don't
This
see
one
it.
right
It
here.
has a blank column off
I
to the
don't
right
have
that says changes above it.
I don't have it.
Mine seems to have the wrong, my worksheet one seems to have the fund balance of 10 million.
That was the
Oh,
one that
okay,
was
I do that.
included in the original packet on Friday. There should be another updated one.
Oh, yep, sorry.
Okay. So hopefully everybody's documents have March 3rd's date on them. And then the ordinance was not date stamped at the bottom. It probably should have been, just for confusion's sake. So as long as it has the bottom line of $8,427,070, then we are working off of the right one.
Cool, okay.
So, I guess, I mean, you should probably take us through it since
Yeah.
we're just now seeing this, and I think probably we've all been poring over the old budget, so.
Yes.
And
Okay.
citizens, too, haven't had the opportunity to see this budget.
Okay, so what I did, I know that there was a lot of discussion about the police department budget, which caused us to take a second look, and I talked to Brian earlier today, and my figures were all based off of hiring people and their salaries for the full year. We are now in March 1st, so obviously we will not be hiring people and paying them a full 12 months worth of salary. So what I did was I printed out the police department's salaries and benefits, and I went over it and looked at it with the chief, and we made a couple of changes. Just since I've started in in December, there have been a few changes in the police department, people retiring, people getting promoted, people getting hired, so it was a lot to keep up with, and so we sat down and we went over this line by line, and we did realize that we had 2 dispatcher lines that should not have been in there. Al Pierce had since retired, and Chief told me to go ahead and remove that line from the salaries document that we were working from. There was also a dispatcher position. I had a vacancy for Campbell, and Peterson had taken over for Campbell, and I had the update for Peterson, but I still had Campbell's vacancy in there, so we removed that as well. And then we put new start dates for the other vacancies. The 2013 approved officer, we put a start date of April 1st, which reduced that budget. We put a start date for the proposed 2014 officer at May 1st. And then the new part-time dispatchers that are proposed, a start date of March 1st, even though we know it's probably going to be mid-March. So I did update those figures. So if you look at the general fund budget and flip to the, let's see, it's the 4th page. It's got the police department's budget. It's been reduced down to the new proposed budget of $1,296,097. And in personnel services, it's at $1,130,397, and that does include the 2014 proposed officer and 2 dispatchers as well, with the reduced rates to reflect more accurate start dates. And then if you look at the next,
Can we ask questions?
yeah,
now?
yeah.
So, some of the the new positions, I guess, any new positions wouldn't be starting until the 2nd quarter of the year.
Correct.
So you're not counting the 1st quarter.
No, we're not. We updated all of that.
However, I mean, one of my concerns is looking into the future. So, for example, next year, the police budget would be presumably bigger than this proposed budget, because at that point, it would be at full annual.
Yes.
So, can you say what that difference would be?
At their full staffing, I would have to rerun what their salaries and wages would look like at full staffing for next year. Because I don't want to just give a number right now without it being an educated number, so, yes. I mean, there are vacancies that are taken into consideration with the 2014 budget, so that is something to think about. Which was why it reduced, because we aren't going to be filling positions for 12 months of the year this year. It would be less.
So Would that old number be roughly close?
It would be
to-
closer, yes.
Closer.
It would be closer, because I was figuring, well,
There
I
would
did
be a
have
couple
two
things.
dispatchers that weren't going to be figured in, so, yeah. That would be a slight difference. But I had the new positions filled in for 12 months, so it was Campbell's part-time, chief? Campbell was full-time? Okay.
So the original public safety budget was what, 1,400,000
Correct,
something thousand?
correct.
So is this about
It's a reduction of
$200,000?
$108,475.
Pardon?
It's a reduction from the previous budget we saw of $108,475. It's an increase of $172,215 over 2013.
So I think the answer, Mary Ann, is all things considered, add 90,000 to this figure, and you'll get about what it would be next year for the full year. If you want an approximation.
What did you say?
Well, but I think that there
Is that
were
from
still,
last
in
year?
what she said, I think that there were some positions removed. She had
There were some
extra
duplications
positions
in
in
There
there.
were, and I've been working
it's
on
not
that
just
since
the
I
height.
got here this morning, so if I ran downstairs, I could rerun any numbers which you have questions about, because I've got it all downstairs. And I also, after talking to Brian, reran some other figures too. Parks have 2 half-time people that I figured in for 8 months instead of 12. The village manager was filled in for 6 months instead of 9, I believe. And, this village manager was 6 months originally. And then the assistant village manager was rerun at 5 months. So that would affect administration, electric, water distribution, and sewer collection as well. So those numbers changed just slightly to reflect lower cost in those areas for the year, since we wouldn't have those positions at 12 months. So are there any questions on the general fund or any of the changes that I made to update the figures in general, special revenue, or enterprise at this point with staffing?
Well, the general fund, so could you just walk me through the new numbers? It looks like, where does our bottom line, I should probably bring up the old one.
The old one had us sitting at about a $400,000 deficit, and now we're at $259,757.
And by my calculations, that would be a 9.6% deficit.
I
mean,
didn't run that
I divided
percentage.
the actual deficit by the income. I don't know if that's how. It was a 17% deficit previous to this change. And last year, the actual deficit was 1.5, I think. So we're still considerably higher than last year.
We've also
Budget.
lost revenue. We've also lost $300,000 in state taxes, which pretty much accounts for it. So I think, this is the first year, 2014 will be the first year we don't have state taxes. And we've also seen the full, do you know from when the state first cut local government, how much, we've lost 60 out of that total, right? Or
I have that downstairs because Judy and I had looked at that, and I don't have that.
So we've lost revenue sources, and our other revenues are essentially remaining stagnant. Our property tax and our income tax, which are our main income sources, are stagnant. And so something's got to give. We can't lose a major revenue source and expect the budget to stay balanced.
Right. Well, we have to do something with expenses then.
That's the other side.
Are we just allowed to be asked?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I'm interested in how much money comes from the levy that was passed however many years ago it was passed, and when that levy would be up for renewal.
I think it's 2017, I think 2017, I think we may have the election. The last election, I think, was in 2010. Or was it-
Yeah, I thought it was, I thought what I'd seen was 10, but
So that means...
We probably voted it in 2010 election, and then it kicked in 2011, or you're saying 20,
Oh, Ken, our levy committee person.
what was it, Ken?
2011,
When we voted on it?
yes.
And it kicked in then in 2012? And it's 4-year?
5.
5, okay, so she was right, 2017.
2017.
And do we know
And it's-
how much income comes from
Isn't it
that?
about 800,000?
I would have to verify that. I'm not sure off the top
think
of my
it's-
head, and I
is
don't
it
want to
in
be
that yellow?
incorrect.
It's, the budget is 740, we get around 760.
Okay. And that's a static number. So that it doesn't increase. As we get more houses, it doesn't increase, it just reduces the rate that everybody pays. So we're getting that amount of money, and that's pretty much it, even with a renewal, if we renew at the same rate, at the same millage.
The revenues that I had figured in were all used in the tax budget that was approved by the auditor, so I didn't spend as much time double checking the revenue figures as I did with going over the expenditures, just because they were already submitted to the auditor and they were approved. So I went with those for the sake of time this year. So forgive me if I don't have exact figures on some of those revenue sources right in front of me right now.
And is what you budgeted for local taxes, is that basically from last year's budget? Is that pretty much what, or, because we were slightly above that for the actual in revenues?
Yes, I went by everything, all of those figures were turned in the tax budget for 2014.
Okay.
So that was where I've gotten all those figures for the local taxes.
So you're saying that the 2014 taxes is reflective of the budget for 20,
The 2014 tax budget that was submitted to the auditors.
what was the budget for 2013 for taxes?
I don't have that expanded version in my hand, unfortunately.
I mean, I'm wondering if it was closer to what we're suggesting 2014.
I can definitely get that back to you. I can get it back to you by the end of the evening if you'd like.
How was the contractual services under council? It's mostly our legal expenses. How was that number arrived at?
I don't have the expanded version in my hand. I didn't have time to print that out. I can grab that when I run back downstairs. I had so many versions of that on my desk today as I was updating it that I was afraid that I was going to grab the wrong one, so I pitched them, and I even asked Brian, I was like, do you think anybody's going to have any more questions about expanded budget? But I can grab it and I can answer all of these questions by the end of the meeting tonight.
Okay.
The figures you gave me, that's the total on the legal fees, that's the total expenditures, and
That spreadsheet that you've got in your hand, yes.
so
That was for all of them.
that's for everything. We have a total of $135,500 in legal fees for
2000.
What sheet are you looking
2013.
at?
That's one that just Karen has. I think Karen,
I'm sorry, what was that number? 1,000,
$135,500, $565.
and that is separated into department. That's what each of those columns are. I think that the one to the far left is council. It starts at council.
Council. And is it between council and administration?
All departments have a little bit of a share, just depends on what the topic of conversation with the attorneys were. So it is separated out because the bills that we get, it says exactly what the topic was. Spent 15 minutes on the telephone regarding, you know, this topic or that topic. And then Susie takes that and parts it off to department based on what the topic was.
If it's utility easement, it would go to the utility department.
Well, I'm just going to say where I am. If this were a balanced budget and we were just getting it as we are now, I'd be cool with approving it. But with almost a 10% deficit and just getting some of these figures now and not having as much information as I would like to have, I can't, I mean, I don't feel like I could, maybe you guys are better at this than me, but I don't feel like I could approve a budget tonight with the,
We've got 2 readings of a budget. I mean, and that is a concern, you know, and that's part of the reason, you know, I know Lori brought up the idea of having a special meeting. That's what we would have to do. We have to have a budget passed by April 1st. We Kent had suggestions. I mean, we can pass a budget just for the quarter. I mean, we can pass a budget that we come back and amend. I mean, we have to explain what your recommendation was.
Well, yeah, what I was going to suggest was adopt this budget, which is operating costs only, no capital, and it has to be in the auditor's hands by April 1st, so you could have a first reading tonight, a second reading in 2 weeks, and send it to the auditor, and you can always amend the budget.
I'm not so concerned about the capital budget because we have reserves and it makes sense to make capital expenses. What I'm concerned about is the operating budget.
Well, what we could do, though, is we could pass this budget knowing it's imperfect and immediately schedule budget, schedule some budget discussions to happen in May, or, you know, possibly with special focuses on areas where we know we're likely to need to cut. I don't know. I think if we scheduled it right away, we just say this can't wait, this needs to be done, then that would be doable. I'm just not sure if there's enough Mondays that people have available. I know I've got planning commission next week, council, and then there's only one final Monday, the 28th, and that's 2 days before it's due. I mean, we could vote on it even 2 days or 3 days before it has to be in.
Well, if it's an emergency, it takes effect immediately.
Right. But in terms of getting it to the, I mean, what has to happen by April 1st? You have to send it in? It has to
Yeah,
be
we
like
have to have it filed by the
postmarked?
auditor. If it has all of
we
the
can
signatures
hand
on it,
deliver
I
it.
can
That's
hand
all you
deliver
do.
it to the auditor's office.
Okay, okay.
Marion, explain, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a balanced budget? Are you
I'm
looking for
looking
no
for an
deficit?
operating
Because-
budget that is approximately in line with last year's, maybe a deficit of 1 or 2%, not
Except-
10%.
Except that we've already approved, about a month ago, we approved, 1.75% salary increase? So we've approved a salary increase for staff. So salaries cannot stay balanced, cannot stay the same as last year because we've already approved a salary increase. So in order to do what you're asking, then we'd have to cut staff.
That's where most of the money is.
What do you suggest? I mean, how could we do this and continue to, I mean, clearly, we cannot continue to do this.
Things look much better. The 200,000 deficit looks a lot better than a $400,000 deficit. I agree with you, and I expressed a lot of concern about this last year, but for whatever reason, our finance director seemed to think it was no problem, because when they started to look at the budget, all that she kept talking about was all of our reserves, but the reserves are getting eaten away every year, and so we cannot continue on like that. So I agree that we are going to have to make, we're going to have to look pretty hard. I think, you know, maybe we need to look at some revenue sources. We don't have a lot, but we may have to look at an increase in revenue from somewhere.
And In the original
Our
budget,
costs are only going to continue to go up. Unfortunately, our costs are only going to continue to go up. Insurance is going to go up, cost of living is going to go up, all of our contracts, our costs are going to go up. But so far, our revenues are stagnant, and that's not a good formula.
in the original budget that was passed last year, ordinance 21228 was $14,135,052. There were supplemental appropriations that ended the year with about $11 million budget, but the original budget that was passed last year was $14 million.
I think that's probably because we had the water plant in there. Is that,
There was a big increase in the water funds.
I'm looking at what we have on our plate. I'm looking at the fact that at the next meeting, we're going to be reviewing our village manager resumes. I mean, we've just got a lot on our plate. Do we have the time? Can we go for a year? Try to cut what we can. Can we go for a year with a deficit budget, and then with a new manager start to relook at it? If we want to have a conversation about the police department, about cutting, because that really, when it really comes down to it, that's kind of it. You look at this budget, that's the area that's increasing. So that's the conversation that we're talking about having, let's be honest. And I don't know if now is the time for this community to take on that conversation. When we're trying to hire a manager, when we've got a lot on our plate, to take on another whole major community discussion.
One option would be to not hire the 2 new officers, and I would support that, and that would be $90,000. I mean, I would rather hold off having new people come on than have to then go back and fire people.
Is that still the number? The new hires?
It's actually a little bit less than that.
90K?
That's the 1 full-time and then the 2 part-time dispatchers, but that is a little bit lower. And I can get that to you before the end of the evening. I can rerun that
Yeah,
allocation, the current.
90,000 is about what it costs for an officer with all benefits. Maybe a little less than that.
What I'm seeing here, I think part of the confusion is that one of the sheets printed today, the account of the public safety, pullout of public safety says 90K in new positions, 2 officers, and then, but on the general fund budget, it says 1 new full-time officer and 2 part-time dispatchers.
And that's correct. 1 new full-time officer and 2 part-time dispatchers, because 1 officer was approved in 2013 but was not hired. So that was a little confusing. And a police officer's salary and benefits is $74. And then the 2 part-timers were $8,700 apiece. Salary and benefits, but that was for the full year.
8,700 each for the dispatchers,
And it was just 1 day a week.
Okay.
and 74 for the,
74 for the
Full
officer.
year. Salaries and benefits.
How much does raising, because we're moving up to greater coverage of having 2 officers on duty, what percentage of this budget is just purely added hours rather than new hires? Does that make sense?
I'm not 100% sure I know exactly what you're asking for.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Okay, it's my understanding that currently there are more hours of the day where we just have 1 officer on duty, and some of that's part-time, right?
Yeah, I think that's.
So I guess
Effectively
that's
have
what I'm
one-
trying.
Effectively have 1 part-time officer.
Okay, so I guess that if it's all salaried, then maybe it doesn't actually I guess I'm just trying to figure out, what's the additional cost to us of adding additional hours where we have 2 officers on duty at all times? Is it basically this 74 for the new officer?
To answer your question, probably that's the way of looking at it, versus hours. It's just the 74 of bringing that officer in, and then we look at the schedule on what best fits to put 2 officers on at all times. So it's not more of an hours thing. I think we just look at the actual salary, and then once we get the people in place, then we look at the schedule and how it works. I think that's
Okay.
probably the easier way of looking at it.
I have a question, I guess, maybe for Tony. Do you know historically what the police coverage has been in terms of the number of officers per hours? Say within the last 5 years, are we increasing the coverage?
I say
Yes, we are.
we are probably increasing by 1 officer, but I would have to give you a true accurate number, I'd have to go back and look in the last probably 3 to 4 years. With retirements that came in, when you have officers retiring and then how they were replaced, I really have to go back and see if they really kept up with the retirements or people leaving the department. Were they filling those departments as these people were leaving? So I really have to go back and look to see if they kept up with that trend.
So I do feel like we're down maybe, but I don't know for sure. I can't, I know that there
You
were.
have to go back and really look at what was approved, say 3 to 4 years ago. Like I said, the way I've seen it is like we've had 3 or 4 retirements plus officers leaving. Can you hire as quickly as officers are leaving? And that's what we're doing right now. That's why we have not hired our 13, because as soon as we got ready to hire the 13 slot, we had 1 officer leave. So we're going to start the trend back over again. You have to make sure you keep up with those trends of hiring as people leave and retire.
And so, does that save money, though? Because are you typically bringing in younger, less expensive officers as you replace?
Yes. Now, the last 2 that we brought in, they did have experience, but they are brought in at the lower rate. They're not brought in at the top pay of officers that have been here 20, 30 years.
So what would the impact be to the department if if we don't bring in if you don't hire new officers this year?
Right now, with vacations, sick leave, or anything else that would come about, what happens right now, we have a guy who goes off on some vacation. That sends us into a tailspin automatically, because that means we're 1 officer down, so we have to backfill that schedule. That's constant overtime until we get that officer back. Same way with sick leave. It's just a constant backfill of people because we don't have enough. We're running a skeleton crew as it is. So 1 person off is automatic overtime for us. Trying to send people to school, automatic overtime, because we usually have 1 officer on at one time. So anytime I send an officer away, call in sick, go on vacation, that is overtime.
Can you go through a 24-hour period, say from 8 to 5? How many officers are out in the community, and how many people, if any, are within the building?
In no disrespect, but I really don't want to go into hours on how many we have our full staff and not full staff here. I think it's...
I mean, I'm talking about the coverage. So like from 8 to 5, are there 2 officers out in the community and you're in the building, and is there someone else beside the dispatcher in? I just am trying to get a sense of what coverage you have been having.
During the day right now, the way we have coverage, I have a sergeant that is here Monday through Thursday with a patrol officer, so both of those are there, and then I am here. I'm sorry, Tuesday through Friday. Weekends, we're running 1 car, but again, I would like to sit down and show you the schedule and how we're doing it publicly and show us where our vulnerable times are. I just don't want to get into that right now. No disrespect, but I think putting those times out of when the department is more vulnerable and when we have manpower out is a security risk right now. I'd be happy to show it to you.
I would like to see it.
take comments from citizens.
Yeah, or do you have,
No, I was just here
or
to
do we
answer
want to go
questions.
through, was there anything else of significance in any of the other budgets that we should look at before we open
Except
it?
for the enterprise fund, the water fund revenue does include the additional revenue from the ordinance that's going to be read tonight. So
Okay.
you'll see that it is now in the black and not in the red. So for what it's worth, and then that would bring the bottom line, the enterprise fund budgets in the black and not the red. So you still have some vulnerability in the sewer fund and the solid waste fund, but the other two are now balanced, showing better numbers for the end of the year. So that's the only real change. Like I said, the assistant village manager and then some of the other folks that were prorated based on more accurate hire dates were updated throughout all of the budgets, but with the enterprise fund budgets, that's the only real significant changes. The legislation that's going to be read tonight was accurately reflected in the budget that you see here, so.
Any other questions from council before we hear citizen comments?
I guess I do have one, Melissa,
Okay.
because I'm looking at the general fund,
Uh-huh.
and I'm trying to determine what I would be subtracting to get to our negative number.
You mean areas in which you would make cuts
Well-
if you had to?
The first page shows our budgeted revenue at 2.7 mil roughly. Mm-hmm. And then
2.6 is basically the total expense.
well, 269.
269.
Yeah, 269.
So then, my, starting on page 2, are my expenses coming out of the general fund?
Yes, everything that you see that's expensed after that first page are all general fund expenses.
Okay.
Most of the budgets are relatively small.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at, because I'm, I'm trying to, you know,
And then you get the transfers, and the transfers where they're going out to streets and parks, which are the two largest ones, it's because the streets and the parks funds don't bring in enough revenue on their own to support their operations. So those transfers out are just purely just to cover operational expenses and balance their budgets.
that's on page 5, right?
Correct. And I guess that the only thing that's really extra that's in here is the widow's fund transfer of $1,500. That's the only thing that's extra. Everything else is straight operational.
So if I'm sitting here looking at how I can balance, page 5 is kind of a wash, right?
It is.
So that leaves me with 2 through 4 of 5 to come up with roughly $260,000.
Correct.
And since my revenue is pretty much a given, unless I go in and try to get some type of tax increase, I don't see where I can make it up. Other than, we gotta get rid of some people. Am I
The majority of
Am I
our
being too
expenses.
simple, or is...
No, I think that you're pretty much right on.
Right. Explain to me the Bryan Center refinance again. Why is that? Are we transferring out of the general fund into the electric fund or vice versa?
Correct. We're transferring out of the general fund into the electric fund because the electric fund paid for the refinance.
So
And we're paying it back?
We're paying it back, yes, until 2016.
And we decided we had to do that. We couldn't just take the money out of the electric fund.
Yes, from everything that I've read, that was,
You refinance $455,000.
Okay.
So the electric fund bought the outstanding paper for $455. Then the electric fund voluntarily prepaid. It's 3 years of contributions. They paid $180,000.
That's right,
To
okay.
themselves.
So-
There's $275,000 left, but that's all general and parks going back to electric.
Okay, and how many, so 73 for, that's like 4 more years? I guess I could do the math. Okay, never mind. Okay.
Now, the only reason I asked that question, we're talking about coming back and looking, another meeting in the future. I don't know what the hell the meeting would buy us, because, again, we're looking, if we're serious and say we want to eliminate the 257,000, we've got to cut staff.
Yeah, let me be blunt as the short timer. Yellow Springs has gotten used to luxury level services because our very strong industrial base financed that for us for decades. And now that the industrial base is gone, you either have to sacrifice services or raise taxes, or some combination of that. So you can't casually look at things like, can we continue to have a local dispatch service 24 hours a day? Can we not buy water from Springfield, even though that's the cheapest option, and do something else just because it's what we would like to do? You're going to have to make those hard choices. So on the one hand, I hear people saying, Yellow Springs is becoming unaffordable, and on the other hand, I hear, I don't want to give up anything. Sorry, it doesn't work that way.
There was a very legitimate reason we were looking at dispatch, and we were looking at outsourcing dispatch. And it obviously wasn't a popular community option, but you have to take significant, in order to balance this budget, there has to be significant money taken out. And that is only going to be able to be done with people.
Well, I guess I would hope for the community, we've had I'd say polarization around the idea of the Center for Business and Education, which would be one mechanism of increasing economic development. So I would hope that when the community understands the situation we're in, that we can come together around some strategies for economic development, whether it's the CBE or something else, because clearly, as we've been seeing, we're either going to be cutting services or raising taxes. And I don't want to raise taxes, and I don't particularly want to cut services. So that's one thing that I would hope that the community can start, that we can start working together rather than against each other. And another thing we could look at, and I'd like to, not tonight though, is our contractual services. I mean, we spent, probably $100,000 for the zoning, and frankly, I think we could have done it for less. And, I mean, we're used to hiring consultants and paying a lot of money, as well as the legal. I mean, maybe it would make sense for us to have a part-time village solicitor as a cheaper way of paying at the whatever rate we pay. So those are just suggestions. We can't do that tonight.
Yeah. I think I would potentially agree with that, except that I think that there are so many different areas of law that are involved that I think it would be pretty hard to find the kind of generalists that would be able to help us. So, I mean, and again, $135,000 in legal fees for this year, when you consider the stuff we had to go through, when you consider the personnel issues we had, they were involved in the zoning code, and we had the pesticide spraying issue. So there were some major issues, and we're involved in a lawsuit. So there were some major issues. I was actually surprised that it was that low. So I don't see that as a significant source of expenditures.
Well, and I would think the 2014 budget, I mean, that's pretty much based on what we spent in 2013, right?
It's actually lower. I went through with each of the department heads with their budgets and looking at what their legal costs were last year and what they anticipated in the coming year based on what is going on and what had happened in the past. And most of them were lower. I worked with Judy on council's budget, and that's where there were quite a bit of legal fees that came out, and we did project that they were going to be lower in 2014 than what they were in 13 based on everything that's going on. So I met with each department head, and we looked at legal fees and tried to predict what was coming and what had happened in the past, and tried to come up with a more accurate figure moving forward, which were lower than what they were in 13.
So why is the number bigger? Like,
Well, contractual services, most of the contractual service lines include a number of different things. Professional services is also part of that. Legal fees is its own line within each budget. And advertising, there's some other things that come out of contractual services, and like in administration, our retainer for the income tax entity that we use, Rita, is in there as well, so there are some other
It's
drivers.
insurance, it's utilities.
Yeah, the $20,000 contract with Management Partners is pretty much taking
Right.
the difference between last year and this year.
right, but our 2012 budget was so much lower, it was about half what it is now. I'm curious how we managed 71,000 in 2012.
But that doesn't show all the legal services, right? Because we just got the number that it was 135.
Yes, it's parted out between various departments.
Right.
What Karen has is the various departments and how that total figure is arrived upon. It's split out.
I don't know those numbers. What are the, do you know those numbers?
I
don't
could
know those
fill that out
numbers.
for you, Karen, when I have a minute and give it right back to you.
Okay.
No, I'm just looking at, like, Rita services are about 70,000 more than they were in 2012. The council share of legal advertising and professional services has gone from 71 to 136, so it's almost doubled in 2 years, not in 1 year, but in 2 years. And I'm not sure how we managed that kind of frugality.
Well, that big increase in administration wasn't just Rita, that was their legal and their professional services that were used as well. So
Okay.
Rita was only a fraction of that.
Part of that.
It's a big chunk of it, but it's only a portion of it. It's not the total amount.
Okay.
So then, the next thing that you'll see, I believe, unless I got these two things switched around, we'll look at the capital budget. This was what Kent and I put together after the last council meeting. Nothing was, there were a few things that council favored, and there were a few things that council did not favor, so based on our recollection, we tried to allocate money in 2014 based on some of the reactions to the capital budget as of last meeting. So there may be some changes to this that are needed, but this is what we came up with together after our best recollection of what was favorable and unfavorable based on the last council meeting.
Well, I think we should hear from citizens on the part of the
General
budget we're
fund.
actually
Yeah.
voting on.
Okay.
And councils, we've heard from council. Okay, citizens, come forward. You need to come up to the microphone, 3 minutes per comment. State your name. Is it not working?
You may want to raise your hand.
Yeah,
You want to come up,
I-
Krista?
I'm disappointed to see there's not any money going into the Green Space Fund. I understand, you got a tough task in front of you. Time goes by so fast sometimes. I've been known to have electromagnetic field problems, but I want to just get this straight in my head just so I know how to proceed. For one thing, I don't see $100,000 appropriation coming out, and I do believe that council voted to put that $100,000 into the Glen project that's expected to close in April or May. So just wanted to make sure I'm still on track with that.
Right, yeah, I think, Melissa, are you aware of that?
Well, I wasn't until the last meeting, so I wasn't 100% sure if that was something
That is, yeah.
that there was legislation that was agreed upon, so I
Yes.
did not put it in there because I was not 100%.
Okay, yeah, no,
And
that's,
that's an easy change, I
Okay.
can update that, no problem.
sorry I didn't get the benefit of the rest of the discussion. I had to go off to our board meeting after the last council meeting, so I'll look forward to talking to people and trying to understand a little bit more about that discussion. But I also want to just say, whether money goes into that fund or not this year, I think we really have to talk about priorities, because we have been acting as if the policy that was passed in 2011 would go ahead. And so I'm going to, definitely be in a tight place if I get a couple landowners. I heard from somebody today that said they were kind of thinking, in addition to, the person that I had mentioned last week. So, we just really do have to prioritize on the potential projects and what should happen first from your perspective. And just to refresh, we're not going to attract as much federal money, unfortunately.
Right.
So it's good to be prepared.
I agree with you, Krista. I think that's really important, because I will tell you that because we've had pretty generous money in that fund, I think we have been pretty generous with approving every request you've brought to us. And part of me wonders, have we been judicious enough? When I think of potentially some of the closer properties that we might have an opportunity to put an easement on, I hope we have made good choices up to now. Obviously, the Glen is a great choice. I think that we do need to sit down and have a deeper conversation with you about priorities, about what we really need to do and what we can realistically do with the budget that we have.
Well, I think we're happy to do that. Kind of going through the visioning process that we went through, we just kind of kept sticking with that same vision of the Greenbelt. And if it's too far out, we haven't really been communicating with some of those landowners that are closer in. Because that was kind of where the preservation target, map was. So just, as soon as we can get to that, and I think, certainly would we want to work from whatever the community is most supportive of, and we don't want to mislead landowners. If they think there is an option, we want to be very honest about exploring it with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do just want to say, we have not voted on this yet, so it's still a discussion point.
Other comments?
Hi, I'm Ann Boland, and I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, because I've heard a couple of different things, so I may be confused. But I was, with regard to the public safety budget, I heard there was going to be a officer that was supposed to be hired in 2013, and a 2014 officer, and 2 dispatches. But then when we were talking, in the conversation, it seemed like only 1 officer and 2 part-time dispatchers were going to be hired. So I just would like a little clarity on that. And then, so yeah, that'd be helpful.
Thanks. I think that the difference is that 1 officer was a holdover from 2013, so actually being proposed in 2014 is 1 additional new officer for 2014 with an additional officer moving forward that wasn't hired in 2013.
That's correct, and they had a vacancy that occurred in 2013, so they backfilled the vacancy instead of hiring the new position. They could have won either way with that. They could have filled the new position and not the vacancy, but they chose to fill the vacancy. So yeah, that was correct.
Thanks.
Just to follow up. So that means that it's going to be more than $90,000, right? It's going to be $74,000 for each police officer and $8,700 each for the 2 dispatchers, not just $74,000 and 2 dispatchers, right?
Right. Yeah, it's included in the budget numbers that we have.
Okay, so then I just want to say, I feel like we really need to have a longer conversation about that, about whether we want to add another officer on top of the 2013 officer that's coming in just because of our deficit, and also because I think the community should really be more involved in that. From what I read in the Yellow Springs News, it seemed like the crime statistics were declining. So why do we need to add a new officer if that's the case. And I really think we should look also at the dispatch situation rather than going into more deficit funding, since we know it's likely to get worse. And even though we're only paying for, in 2014, 6 months, that's still a commitment to pay full-time for, you know, the rest of that person's operative position here. So I just feel like it's kind of sprung on us as a community, and it would, to me, would require more conversation about what we actually need in the community right now.
Thank you. Judith?
Hello, Judith Hempfling. You guys look great up there. On the side. Well, I guess I came in a little late. I understand there's a $300,000 increase in the police budget being requested. Has that changed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what,
It's a $172,000 increase in the police budget.
so a little less than $200,000
Yes.
increase? Okay. I just, well, first of all, I don't understand the situation. I understand we lost revenues, we lost state revenues, and we lost estate tax revenues. And the amount of revenues that we lost, estate tax, of course, helped our fund, our general fund, and it's been a very strong fund. That suddenly we have an operating deficit budget shocks me, and I don't quite understand it. To think that under that circumstance, we're going to add almost $200,000 to our police budget, I just want to register that I'm very opposed to it. I don't know what the answer is in our police department. I do know that we have spent a lot, that our police budget has been by far, and I'm sure this is true in most communities, the largest part of our general fund budget. And to think that we're going to add to that and that it's going to put us in deficit, I just think it's not something that we're going to be able to afford it. It means that when the levy 2 years ago when we did the levy the second time, I had suggested we reduce the levy. Obviously, that would not have been a good idea. We didn't know at the time we were going to be losing that state monies. But I think that we have high taxes here for schools. Townships planning to come to us, I think, for a tax, for some kind of monies for a new fire building. And I just don't see how we can, ordinary people can continue to live here if when you come back for the levy, what you're thinking about is you're going to have to increase that request. I just think it's, there definitely feels like there is a burden already. So other communities have safe communities with lesser police budgets. I would like to see us look at, what to kind of have that larger conversation. There's no time to have it before this budget is passed. And I very, very much am opposed to adding, additional, other than what you've already agreed to, in terms of the increases to staff. I think, we're really going to have to look at it as a community and figure out, some other way and how we can strengthen other aspects of our village to stay safe, because I just don't think we're going to be able to afford it. Thank you.
Thanks, Judith.
Thanks.
Other comments?
My name is Amanda Banizak, and I'm coming to comment on the letter I had included in the packet this week. Now, we've been having these budget conversations, and they're very enlightening to me, and I feel like that relative that comes and says, okay, but could I have some money for this instead? This is something that we hadn't talked about before, and I hadn't brought up before to the council specifically. I've been in the community talking with parents, talking with people who use the community center, and what we've been looking at is the hope that we could get more resources for the youth room downstairs. I'm not sure when you've last walked through it or been there when it's in use. It's a very lively space. It's a wonderful community resource. It's very run down. It's pretty shabby. The flooring's torn up. there are a lot of things that could be done with some kind of funding. I'm not here with a number tonight specifically, but I'm here to just put it out there. I see on this budget where there's still some in the Parks and Rec Fund. There's 2 different Parks and Rec funds, and it looks like one's being almost entirely used, and then there's 55,000 allocated from another with still a 200-some budget left at the end of this current budget session. So I would love to see some work on that, some work on getting that rehabbed, refurbished. The Bryan Center is really an amazing space for this community. All of the activity that takes place around here lends a very vibrant, very diverse, welcoming energy to the whole community, which I love that value number 3 of your resolution tonight is to be a welcoming community of opportunity for people of diverse races, ages, sexual orientations, cultures, and incomes. And the Youth Center really specifically targets both the ages and the incomes. I see a lot of kids there that otherwise, that 3 after school to 9, they don't have a lot of places to be. So like I said, I don't have a specific number. You know, I'm not even going to throw anything out there right now. But I would love to see and work with council to come up with some more resources for refurbishing it, and then potentially look at what we could do to have there be some programming in and around the Bryan Center. I think that if the space itself looks better, is better kept, that we would be more likely able to receive community funds and support in forms of stipends for programming, for things like some summer camps that would be affordable to the residents and to the youth here. So I would love to follow up with you or figure out how that conversation can continue.
Thanks, Amanda. Any other comments? Diane?
Diane Chittister. I wanted to get some clarification about the estate tax revenue source. I thought I understood that I thought someone said that we were losing a $300,000 state revenue source, which we're not. That was a 1-year payment of estate tax, which in the last 5 years, it varies hugely. It's gone from 60,000 some years, 300,000 was the highest, I think.
Yeah.
So that's not a $300,000 revenue source that we're losing. It was never in the operating budget because we couldn't predict how many people would die, basically. So,
But when you're
Trying to
looking at whether a budget from the previous year is balanced, that 300,000 has an impact on whether that helped last year's budget.
okay,
balance.
that was a 1-year, yeah.
A 1-year windfall.
Taki, apparently, come on.
Hi, my name is Taki. I guess I wanted to say something different, but given the tenor of the discussions, I'll have to discard what I planned to say. I want to point out that there's a phrase which goes by the humbug of finance, which began in the early 1920s in the City of London, and it was propagated by the British Treasury, and it came to be known as the Treasury View. And that view basically says that in all circumstances, the government, be it a state government, a national government, or a municipality, has to balance its expenditure with its income and not resort to any fiscal deficit. And this view propagates the idea that this is the most desirable policy for any government. This view was pervasive prior to the Great Depression, and a slight variation of this view is that the fiscal deficit must, under all circumstances, never be allowed to exceed a certain small limit. Okay, and again, this was first developed in 1929 in a white paper by the British Treasury. This view was, in my opinion, just thrown out of the door in 1931, prior to Keynes, actually, and at that time, it became to be known in a sort of derogatory way as the humbug of finance. And I have a fear here that we've been afflicted by this humbug of finance in the village of Yellow Springs. I've looked in detail at these numbers, given the amount of reserves that the village is actually sitting on. We can go for a number of years and just forestall any number of these discussions later. And I think this budget is basically a healthy budget, even if you pass it as it is, frankly. So I just want to say we shouldn't be taken in by this affliction. It really has ravaged economies and municipalities across the U.S. for decades, and it is a serious sickness. Thank you.
Thanks, Taki.
Hi, I'm Heather Wright. I just wanted to second some of the comments and concerns that have been raised about elevating the police budget. I think that not only would I like to see some sort of broader discussion about how we're approaching safety and other social justice issues in our community, but I'd like to see a real cost-benefit analysis done. You know, we are not comparable to a lot of smaller communities. I'm sympathetic to that argument because we are a tourist destination and we have a lot of liquor licenses out. But I believe that it's not enough to say other larger communities do it X way, so we need to do it that way here. In other words, do we really need to have 2 police officers on call all the time? It probably would be better from a certain point of view, but I assume that there are also arguments to be made against it. So I would urge council to be cautious, and I would prefer to see the increases removed from the budget before it's passed, and then to have a continuing discussion about these issues into the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather. Michael?
Hi, Michael Ains. I just want to echo what many people have said. I appreciate the reasoned discussion and our lesson about balanced budgets and the bugaboo therein. But I come from a academic culture that values a lot of quantitative analysis, and so we're looking at the largest portion of our budget and a quite substantive increase. And I have not heard something that we have in academia, which is a full-time equivalent, right? So I want to know, we have exactly 1.8 FTE for the year 2003 and 1.95 FTE for the year 2004. I'd like to see some real analytic capability brought to this issue. If we don't know how many people we've had, we should chart how many people we had. If we don't know how many people other types of communities, and I'd like to echo Heather Wright's comments for a cost-benefit analysis vis-a-vis liquor licenses and all the other challenges facing the police. So if there's a logical argument that we can pass the budget as is and amend it later, there's likewise, as Heather just stated, the logical argument that we can pass the budget without the increase and then amend it later after this type of deep analysis can be done.
Thank you. I just looked at the clock and realized it's after 7. Any other comments about the budget? Because I think what we're going to do is, what we will do is get back to the regular agenda and then get to the budget ordinance in the regular agenda. So, any other comments? Do you want to make a comment on it?
Hi, I'm Lincoln Alpern. I've lived off and on in Yellow Springs for about 5 or 6 years, and I also, not wanting to say anything about whether this is a good or bad budget in terms of being balanced or not, want to express concern about the additional police hires. My understanding is that there have been some controversies regarding many aspects of police work in Yellow Springs for years. This is stuff that I've heard going back 3-4 years, and I think that before any additional hires are approved, we need to have these discussions that people talked about and look at the roots of whatever problems we have and what is the best way to fix them, rather than emergency hire more police staff.
Thanks. Okay, we'll end the budget discussion. We'll get back to the regular agenda and then beyond to that in not too much longer. Let's go to announcements. Any announcements?
Yeah, I have 2. first of all, I just wanted to give an update on the village manager hiring search. We now have 41 applicants, and we've been advised that 10 of them look really good. The next step in that process, after we close the period on March 7th, will be for us to review those recommendations to see if we agree with sort of the tiering. And the second thing I wanted to mention was just that Mary Ann and I attended the new council training on Saturday, and one upside thing that I thought was interesting was we did have a segment on ways to generate revenue that do not burden our citizens, such as a hotel tax, and we know that's coming up, as well as there's something called an admissions tax. So we are going to explore those and see, what sort of benefits that we can bring in that, again, will not increase the tax burden of our local citizens.
Okay, anything else? Anybody else? Okay. Moving on to the minutes of February 18th, page 1. These will just be of substance, comments of substance. Page 2. Page 3. I had one up quarterly treasurer's report. I think that Rachel didn't recommend going with the TIF and the 20-year renewable bonds. I just think that she noted the recommendation was to go with a TIF. I don't know that she actually weighed in on giving her opinion on it. And then down in the next paragraph, McKinley stated that she would like to discuss the bank fee structure compared to return on investments with Van Zandt. Page 4. Down kind of in the middle, or well, somewhat in the middle, begins with Reyes asked if there had been review of the contracts from Springfield.
Okay.
Page 5. I had a couple, near the top, Bristol stated that in his opinion, beginning, I think engineering work should be on the loop completion project is urgent. And then down, just above manager's report, Christine Roberts commented that the electric system task force report recommended infrastructure improvements. Page 6. Kind of a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Oh, right.
That's right, 3 of you, or 2 of you. Okay. Anything, I mean, this has obviously been an odd agenda, but we'll get back to the normal scheme of things as we move on. Anything else we need to talk about adding or subtracting?
I just thought we should, under new business, briefly discuss the MOU that we got about the
Okay.
bronze sculpture trail. I don't think that should take very long.
No, okay. Lori, do you have the petitions and communications to review?
Right. We received a letter from Judith Hempfling about solicitor fees, and she addressed that in her comments tonight. And we received a letter from Steve Deal about sort of what he calls an inverted process on the CBE, asking us to think about the best strategy for the CBE if it were to be developed, I think is how I would put it.
Yeah, and I do want to note, you may not be aware of this, Lori, that there was a page missing from that letter. It was added today. Judy, can you see that it's added to the online packet, please?
Yeah.
I think, I don't.
Yeah, I was able to read it.
Okay. but citizens may not have been aware of that.
Right.
And it was a little confusing to read.
Yeah, because it did jump from page 2 to page
Yeah.
4, and there was a whole page missing.
And then
Oh, and then the bronze trail, but we'll be discussing that later.
Yep.
So it's a memorandum of understanding to put in the new bronze sculptures that came out of the bronze festival that went on last year, the sculpture symposium.
Okay. So then we'll move on to public hearings and legislation. First reading of ordinance 2014-06, approving a water rate increase and declaring an emergency. Judy?
Yeah. This is amending section 1046.02 service charges of chapter 1046 water of part 10 streets, utilities, and public services of the codified ordinance of the Village of Yellow Springs and declaring an emergency, whereas the village water fund is the least healthy of the various village funds, and whereas foreseeable capital improvement requirements will further stress the resources of the water fund, and whereas scheduled rate increases established in 2010 are proving insufficient to fund the needs of the water utility, now therefore the Council of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio does hereby ordain that Section 1, the rate increase previously ordained to take effect on April 1st, 2014 is hereby repealed. Section 2, in its place, a new rate to take effect on April 1st, 2014 is hereby enacted as follows. Monthly readiness for service charge is $6.80. Consumption charge per 1,000 gallons is $5.25. Section 3, this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure immediately necessary to preserve the public interest and for the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the village. Wherefore, this ordinance shall be in effect immediately upon its adoption by council.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
This is something that I think Lori was quite vocal about by all rights. As it said, we had done a rate study about 5 years ago. We had a rate increase, stepped rate increase over a 5-year period. The last to take effect would have been April 1st of this year. And it was what, Kent, like a 3%? 3%, a very small increase. We had front-loaded it a little bit, and unfortunately, even that front-loading wasn't sufficient for all of the infrastructure projects that we have to take care of. We have, obviously, we're in discussion about a new water plant. We have a lot of water line projects that need to be taken care of, so we just needed a way to start to get a head start on building up the fund for our capital projects that are coming down the road. And actually, even on operating, we were starting to come close to eating into our operating, going into the red in our operating. So we just needed those rate increases. Kent, anything else you would like to add?
What this would mean for a typical user is about $4 a month or just over $50 a year
Okay.
in increase.
That's based on 6,000 gallons.
6,000 gallons.
A month. So it comes out as just a 6 on your bill, which it can be confusing. It looks like 6 gallons, but you probably didn't just use 6 gallons, 5 gallons.
Any other comments from council, questions? Citizens? We will have one more reading. It's an emergency ordinance, which means, but we are doing 2 readings, and what the emergency means that it will go into effect immediately after the second reading. So it will be in effect for April 1st. But we will have another public hearing for citizens to add comments. Anything right now? Taki?
I just want to say that I support this rate increase. I do have a question, however. So the consumption charge per 1,000 gallons in the present ordinance is $5.25 per gallon per 1,000 gallons, excuse me. I have in front of me here Table 1 from an earlier 2011 study done of the various water plant options for Yellow Springs. And I notice that that charge is consistent with the scenario which proposes to upgrade the current water plant. So is that what you are voting on today?
No. I mean, it was just a kind of a stopgap. I mean, we actually probably need a larger rate increase. This was to kind of balance. We were actually talking about a 25%. So this is not, this particular number is not tied to any of those scenarios. It's just to get a jump on building our fund balance. to get ready for the capital projects.
To avoid going into the red, because
Right.
this was a red budget until.
Yes.
Until this was included. Melissa explained that it did put our utilities back into the black, and we probably are going to have to do, we're going to have to do some kind of increase in our sewer fund as well.
I saw 2 hands, I think, 3 hands now. I think I saw Sam first, and then,
So Judy, is this not working?
I just have to mess with it, so if you can deal with me messing with it for 1 second, I will.
So it may make a noise.
yeah.
Nothing personal.
Just go ahead, Sam.
I'm Sam Young. Just a point of clarification. You talk about an April 1st effective date. Does that mean that will show up on our bills May 1st or April 1st?
No, April 1st.
I'm just curious.
I think April 1st.
So in effect, it will be retroactive to the 1st of March,
Yes,
or in that order of magnitude.
yes.
Dawn, did I see your hand up?
I'm Dawn Johnson. I think Lori answered this. I saw also a deficit in the sewer fund and also in the solid waste fund. Are we to expect increases in both of those as well? And I think that would be reasonable. I'd like to see these things balanced. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I actually did mean to ask about the solid waste fund, because that's a contractual service, and it doesn't make sense to me that our rates aren't, I thought that was all sort of set when we did the contract with Rumpke. How is it that we're running a slight deficit?
I know that last year it was, there was a bill that had not been paid. There were, I believe, 2 bills that had not been paid, so the actuals from 2013 look a lot better than what they actually were.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure about, I haven't seen the contract for Rumpke, but I do know what Jason had requested from them in terms of what was actually billed in 2013, and we took that into consideration with a slight increase for 14, and the expenditures do outweigh the revenues, so based on the charges for service and the trends that we've seen. But he did get a more accurate number from Rumpke, which isn't reflected here because some of the bills weren't paid in 13, so the actuals were skewed, so.
Okay, right. I'm a little less concerned about, I mean, we want that one to be in balance, and we will make sure it gets in balance, but there's a little bit of a cushion in that fund that's kind of well, there's no capital associated with that fund, so it's less of a problem if we go into that for a few months. I'm less worried about, oh, but we're not planning for the future, because it's purely a in and out kind of fund.
Heather, did I see you have your hand up? Come on up.
I am Heather Wright. I just wanted to express my opposition to the rate increase, since we've been living here for 10 or 11 years, and it seems like our utilities are going up and up and up, and it's one thing after another. And while $5 a month doesn't seem like very much, I think in the grand scheme of things, and particularly considering that we have been over the last few years experiencing a rate increase in our water, I'd like to see the village council not pass this rate increase and keep the pressure on the water issue. It may be the case that we can't afford to retool the plan. We might have to look to Springfield. Speaking of bottom lines and what amenities we can afford and what amenities we can't afford. I'm also wondering if council has considered taking a look at any data regarding whether or not or how villagers have been able to keep up with the rate increases over time. So has there been an increase in delinquent accounts over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? That might give us some sense of affordability. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather. Any other comments? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, Heather. I mean, but as Lori has said and as Melissa said, I mean, we literally, this isn't about capital improvements, and I should have been more explicit in my comments about saying that. I'm glad Lori pointed it out. I mean, this is literally to keep the fund in the red. This isn't spending, or in the black. This isn't spending any money on capital improvements. It's partly anticipating, partly building slightly, but we are running, the water fund has been running at a deficit for a few years now. We're just not charging enough for water for what it costs us to produce it and pipe
distribute it.
And distribute it.
The distribution is a big thing, because we've got pipes that, well, there's just a lot that's needed to be done and that still needs to be done. We've got problems with fire service in terms of having enough water so that if there's a fire on one part of town, particularly around the college, and we're trying to deal with that right now. So it's a complex thing, and either doing the pipe from Springfield or a new plant, there's a pretty big upfront cost. Where we save money from Springfield is down the line, because you put a pipe in the ground and there's pretty much no costs after that for probably about 100 years. You put in your own plant and there are ongoing costs, considerably more. So but upfront, you don't see that immediate difference. It's really down the line that you arguably see more difference. At least that's my understanding of it.
But there is a distribution cost, even if we were to go.
And even if we go to
from
Springfield. That,
our own
all the
pipes.
costs of the pipes, our aging infrastructure, none of that goes away.
Well, I just wanted to add, I mean, one thing that I do think is relevant is that we are looking at considering a fund transfer to keep that rate increase as low as we can. And that's something we're going to be talking about more. And the second thing is, didn't you share with us last time that, at least in terms of electric charges, we are cheaper in Yellow Springs than DP&L?
Yes,
by about 13%.
It's hard to make an exact comparison, but we're 11 or 12% lower in electric than a DP&L customer would pay.
Okay.
Thank you. Judy, would you please call the roll?
McQueen.
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Tausch.
Yes.
Estlund.
Yes.
Winthrop.
Yes. Moving on to ordinance 2014-07, adopting the 2014 Village of Yellow Springs budget and declaring an emergency.
Okay, and I am reading the one provided earlier by Melissa, is that correct? One revised.
The bottom line is
Yep.
8-some million.
Okay. And I won't read it tonight, but we will need to add a section 9. So section 8 will become, this is an emergency measure because of such and so, and then the section 9 will be this ordinance shall. This is the 2014 annual appropriations and declaring an emergency. Whereas this ordinance is adopted to make appropriations for expenses and other expenditures of the Village of Yellow Springs, State of Ohio during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2014. Now therefore the Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby ordains that, Section 1, to provide for expenses and other expenditures of the said Village of Yellow Springs during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2014, the following sums are hereby set aside and appropriated as follows. And I'm giving the total general fund appropriations, which are $2,951,449. Section 3, that there be appropriated from the following special revenue funds, and I'm giving that total, which is $1,020,598. Section 4, that there be appropriated from the capital project funds, that total is not included. Section 5, that there be appropriated from the enterprise funds, that total enterprise fund appropriation is $4,455,023. Section 6, that the appropriation from the total fund budget is as follows. The grand total appropriations for all funds is $8,427,070. Section 7, the finance director and the village manager are hereby authorized to draw warrants on the village treasury for payments from any of the foregoing appropriations upon receiving proper certificates and vouchers. Therefore, approved by an ordinance of council to make the expenditures, provided that no warrants shall be drawn or paid for salaries or wages except persons employed by authority of and in accordance with such ordinance. Section 8, this ordinance shall take effect at the earliest period allowed by law.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And just to be clear, repeat what Melissa had said, this budget, just for expediency's sake, does not include any capital projects. We have quite a few capital projects that we're planning that are in the budget that we've discussed. We will be adding those into the budget with a supplemental appropriation. It just seemed that with so much discussion still being had about just the general budget, that getting into capital could wait. And since we do have the April 1st deadline, we wanted to make sure we got something in. So, council, I mean, we kind of ended abruptly. I didn't sense our discussion. I didn't sense that there was necessarily closure on council's part, so let's, Mary Ann.
Well, I do not support adding any additional people to the police department. I do support having whatever staffing we had, but not adding additional. So at this point, I would not support this for that reason.
Well, why don't you move to amend it?
Okay. I move to amend this budget to remove whatever the cost is for adding the additional.
I think you said it was 90,000, right?
That was for the full year.
Yeah.
It would be a prorated amount. I've got it downstairs on my computer, I didn't bring it up.
Is that for both, or is that just for the police officer?
That was for
Well.
the one police officer and the 2 part-time dispatchers.
And the 2 part-time dispatchers, we're talking about $16,000, because they're both about 1 day a week? Okay. So I guess the question is, are you amending to get rid of all 3 of those positions?
Well, I don't know if the 2 part-time dispatchers are replacing people
Yes, they are.
that were there.
They're
So
replacement.
this is about adding new, so it would be the 1 new officer, not the dispatcher.
Tony, could you address, are we down any officers?
Yes. We're still down at 2013, we still have.
Right, but that's been budgeted already. This is the additional, we're talking about 1 additional $74,000 expenditure. So that's what I understand, Mary Ann.
Yes.
So what I understand Mary Ann to be doing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Ann, is to be saying that the line item, public safety total, underneath that personnel services, the personnel services number is $1,130,397, that you would subtract $74,000 from that and get a total of $1,056,397.
Actually, it would be a prorated amount because that number that you just read under personnel services, that $1,133,997 included the prorated amounts for the officers. So it would actually be slightly less than that, and I can grab that figure, be back up in 5 minutes.
Okay, so is there a way for us to make a motion on that without a real number?
I mean, I think you could ask to remove
The new-
budgeted amount for 1 additional officer for your remainder.
Does that satisfy your motion?
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Do we take a vote on that motion?
You didn't.
Okay. Is that just a roll call vote?
Well, we probably should, just because it may get difficult to hear who's doing what, so I'll go ahead and do that. Sims?
No.
Pausch?
No.
McQueen?
Yes.
Asklund?
Yes.
Winthrop?
Yes. Okay, any other comments on the budget? Comments from citizens? Dawn, come on up.
Dawn Johnson, I see here you've got 84,000 in your planning total, and for that amount, you could have a real planner employed here at the village, or even a lesser amount than that, and you would have saved yourself quite an expense in attorney's fees with the CBE business. I just wonder why we spend 84,000 on consultants and engineers, when if you had a trained planner, you probably wouldn't need to do that.
Because we have an interim village manager, and we have not had the ability to hire. That is something I was assured by Melissa that number will cover. If we decide we're going to hire a planner, that number will cover it.
Okay.
We're just not in a position to hire.
You haven't had a planner for some number of years, so.
That was a
Just wanna
decision
make
that was
that-
made. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, not some numbers of year, I think 1 year.
Yeah, I mean,
1 year.
the contract started in December. It was for the year 2013.
Oh, I see what you're
That's the-
saying, though, because the former, Ed's position wasn't an official planning position. Yeah, it wasn't a trained planner. That is correct. Thank you.
Other comments? I don't know that we need to add significant money to the budget, but I would like to ask Kent to have Jason look at the youth center. I am guessing that there are probably things that, some repairs and some work that can be done in that space without much of an expenditure of money.
Yeah, I was thinking, since we were thinking of putting money into redoing this space because the sound is so bad and it's difficult for people, and the mayor's this has not been a great space, and increasingly it's difficult to even show things up on the walls. So we were planning to probably do that, a little upgrade to this space. I wonder if it would be there'd be some benefit in doing the two things at once, hiring painters, et cetera, to come in and do it all at once.
And since we brought it up, I did visit and talk with Samantha this afternoon about the youth center, and I guess the prior budget, when community council was still funded, was about $2,500 a year, and she mentioned that would be plenty to cover many of the activities that they do. I do also know that they're looking at some different possibilities for grants. So, I mean, there's a lot of activity as far as, trying to not only fix that room, but also think about activities. So,
I mean, there's $2,500 in the budget, so we've continued to fund that space at the same amount. It's just that it's now coming out of our budget as opposed to community council.
Right.
I have a question. So repairs, would that be considered capital, or that's just operating?
I think that should be operating, personally. I think maintenance, painting is maintenance. I mean, that's operating.
Painting and floor, which is basically what it looks like is mostly needed, and maybe the equipment might be able to be done. I mean, if we're thinking about the playground set outside, and that could all be thought about together, and we were talking about having the arts committee looking at that.
Yeah, and as far as equipment, I mean, there are things like, there's no pool sticks for the pool table. I think there's potential to get some donations for things like that. The air hockey switch is broken. So there are some things that I think could be fixed pretty easily.
Okay. I do think that I want to get a little bit back into the mindset. I mean, we had been going to the community. A lot of projects have been built by the community for the village, including the train station and the skate park. And, I think we can get back to some of that when we're talking about major improvements. This isn't a major improvement, but when we start to talk about some of these capital projects, the idea of more programming for the youth center, I think is great, but again, that's staffing, and so that's us taking on, you know, a continuing expense as opposed to small improvements, that it's a one-time expense, so.
Right, and related to that, you know, Samantha did say, we're very open to community collaboration and volunteers. In fact, I saw a whole program that they had for 2013 of arts classes and you know, nature walks and things. So I do think it's a community effort with some of our support.
Okay. So we have an amended budget. We don't have a bottom line number because Melissa will do that. We'll have that.
Downstairs.
Well, I don't even think we need to worry about it. I think that the way that Judy has described it, just bring it to the next meeting. We'll amend the budget.
It'll be 8.3 something instead of 8.4 something.
And we'll actually get it corrected for the newspaper, so what's going to be printed on Thursday will be the corrected ordinance, the amended ordinance, I'm sorry.
Any other discussion? We ready to take a vote, council? Judy?
Okay, Hausch,
Yes.
Asplund,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Winthrop.
Yes. Next, we have Resolution 2014-13, adopting the Village Council annual goals for 2014. And is there a new document on our table?
Yes, there is.
I'm never going to be able to find it. Here it is.
Okay, whereas the Village Council adopts goals to guide decision-making and resource allocations of the village, and whereas the Village Council has collaborated in public as to the aspirations, needs, and vision for the community, and whereas the Village Council has sought the advice from the community in goal setting for 2014, now therefore the Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that. Section 1, Council has identified the following values as the basis for the 2014 goals. Value 1, deepen decision-making processes with active citizen participation and effective representative governance. Value 2, be an excellent employer and provider of services within a responsible fiscal framework. Value 3, be a welcoming community of opportunity for people of diverse races, ages, sexual orientations, cultures, and incomes. Value 4, pursue a strong economy that provides diverse employment, a stable tax base, and supports the values of the community. Value 5, seek in all our decisions and actions to reduce the carbon footprint of the community and encourage sound ecological practices throughout. Value 6, provide careful, creative, and cooperative stewardship of land resources. Section 2, the 2014 council goals as detailed in the attached document are hereby approved.
And in the packet that we received, oh, excuse me, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Judy had also included the graph format that we had looked at the last meeting. I haven't added anything to it. I haven't had the energy to add anything to it or change it, but it basically takes all of the goals that are in text and narrative and put them onto this graph. Mary Ann, you had been, the goals had been a priority of yours.
Well, my sense is that the goals that are shown under the values in the resolution are not exactly the goals that we have in the graph.
They are.
Well, for example, under value 2, the fourth one, hold discussion on use of surveillance cameras. I thought we had scratched that.
Yeah, we had.
And there are other things in here that were actually, I think, 2013. I mean, I'm fine approving the graph goals, but this really has things from.
Well, you know, when I did it, I had this notion that it needed to be all linear and.
I know, but we had
So-
taken stuff out.
Yeah, well, and I changed it, but clearly some of those things I did not pull back out. So that can just, we can just take that attached piece out and attach this, which was
Okay.
fine as it went. I just got a little overzealous and under editorial, clearly.
One goal I would add, probably under value 2, partly based on tonight, I just don't want to lose track that we do need to do a sewer rate study, or at least one way or another figure out how to raise our rates to keep them in line with our income.
So do you want sewer rate study or
Sewer rate
increase?
study.
Okay.
I think big and flashy.
You didn't take that on.
Well, that is unfortunately way beyond my pay grade.
Okay, any other discussion?
I mean, the only other thing that, I don't think it needs to be an amendment, but I did just want to mention that, under resources, we also have, in some places, some of our commissions that can help out with things. For example, the HRC has been interested in helping support the website and communication, and Parks and Rec, we've talked about the Public Art Commission. So I just wanted to note those.
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't been developed at
As
all.
resources.
Right, but just so that we know that's out there.
I think this is a work in progress, really.
Yes.
Hopefully, it's in progress.
Until the next thing
It
comes
would
up.
probably be good to just kind of, are these separated out and put up on the website? Is that where they are?
We're working on the Google Calendar, which is where they'll show up.
Right.
It needs a little further tweaking.
Right, and that's something that we can share. I mean, we can, in fact, I think the chamber even is moving to maybe a Google Calendar.
I don't know, probably not. but-
Okay. But it is used, yeah.
Yeah, have you guys been getting that, by the way? Because you're on the email list for...
I haven't gotten anything, except that very first one you guys sent out with a link to it.
It's interesting. Okay.
I don't think
We can
so.
talk about that as well, too.
Yep.
I don't know that I got anything ever.
And we've got to be really careful about how we're using this in the communication, because...
Oh, yeah, no one has editing power. It's
Okay,
only,
okay.
here, look at this.
We could just see it, yeah.
Okay.
It's over the phone only. Yeah, no one can...
So we can't
Right,
have
because
an
that would be
unofficial meeting.
Yeah, that would be violating sunshine law.
I would suggest, and probably Karen, you were thinking about this, would be just making sure we bring these goals kind of back every few months.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Making sure they wind up back in our packet so we glance at them, and a lot of them we're not going to forget about. I mean, hiring the manager and doing the water sourcing, it's going to be kind of in our face, but other things that are maybe a little less obvious.
And that actually is one of the functions of the calendar. It should pop up.
To help their mind.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, one of the things
Yeah,
we
I
can
love
do, we can have like, notifications 3 months out, 1 month out, 1 week out. We can
Oh,
do as
nice.
much as we want, so.
Good. Okay,
I guess I do have a question here on the goals in terms of, we kind of, I guess we says person or persons responsible. But some things may require council approval. So,
well, everything on here requires council approval.
okay, so, because
It's more like you're a point person when you're in that. It's like you're
that's
the
why I want
one
to
who's kind of
make,
trying
that's why I want to make sure we
keep
make
your eye on
clear
that
that.
ball.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I think
it's
council is on every one of these, and there were just ones where somebody had already expressed a specific interest in it that I put a single name.
Yeah, but we're not working independently.
No, no.
Okay.
Not free agents.
Okay.
If there is no more discussion, we'll take a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Oh, sorry, was there?
Is it appropriate to have a
Sure.
Sure, I think we just...
It's always appropriate.
It's just boring, that's all.
Here I am again. I wondered I haven't seen the chart version, but Value 6 has got a bullet, commit 2011 estate tax monies to Green Space Fund per council policy, on the one that I've got. So I'm gathering that that's outdated, but If there is sort of a follow-up, or it seems to me like it's appropriate to maybe do some sort of a follow-up, which would be more like, reevaluate preservation priorities and green space funding policy.
Right.
And what we do have is determine a strategy for funding the Green
Right.
Space Fund.
Okay, great.
And actually, Mary Ann is our point person on that.
Okay. Okay, great.
And TLT is our resource.
Oh, well, all right, thank you. We'll look forward to it.
Yes.
Thanks.
You want to add? Reevaluate?
No, I think we can just expand that one to cover it. Okay, everyone, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution 2014-14, authorizing then and now certificates for purchase of salt. Oh.
Do I have it? No. Sorry.
Just use one.
Here it is.
Thank you. Okay, whereas the finance director has pending invoices each exceeding $3,000 for services or supplies that were ordered and delivered prior to obtaining certification from the fiscal officer that funds were available, and whereas both section 5705.41 of the Ohio Revised Code and village policy require prior certification of the availability of funds for major purchases, and whereas the ORC provides an exception allowing retroactive certification when the requisite funds are available both at the time the purchase commitment was made and when payment is due, known as a then and now certificate, and whereas the finance director states that sufficient unencumbered money is and was available both at the time the purchase was made and at the time payment was due for the obligation listed below, Greene County Engineer, $4,004. Now therefore, the Council of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that Section 1, Finance Director is hereby authorized and directed to issue then and now certificates for the obligations listed above and to pay them from the appropriate accounts upon receiving properly executed then and now certificates. Section 2, this resolution shall be in full force and effect immediately upon passage.
Thank you, Judy. Can I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Discussion? Melissa, would you just take 1 second to re-describe then and now?
Yes, it basically, especially with the salt, it was something that was unplanned for, and therefore the Parks Department doesn't do a blanket order for salt because they have no idea on how much to anticipate that we might need during the year. So there was no purchase order for the purchase of the salt. The purchase had to be made. We had the money for it, however, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse and buying the salt without the purchase order, which it was a necessity at this point, so.
We know that. We do know that one. Thanks. Any other discussion? Citizens? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Now is the time in the agenda where we will hear from citizens about items that aren't on the agenda.
Are not.
Yes. Anybody? Sam?
This is partly on the agenda, partly not.
You're walking a thin line there.
Only give them 2 minutes.
I'm Sam Young. I hear and I read a lot about the fund balances and the need for increasing revenues. I'm putting that together with all the negativism I heard in the past about the CBE, and I'm wondering if it wouldn't be instructive for someone in the village government to do a study about what would be the differences in our revenues if we had not lost the industrial base that we have over the past 20 years.
Thanks, Sam.
Just off the top of my head, Sam, when Vernay was active, they were using something like 30 or 40% of all the water and electricity the village was selling. So it makes a huge difference.
I knew that about the electricity. I didn't know it about the water.
Oh, yeah, they use a lot of the water.
All of the industrial companies use all of the utilities.
Right.
They also have employees with income tax contributing to the general fund.
Oh, yes.
I just think we need to know what we're talking about here before we start talking about the CBE again. So give us some numbers.
And actually, we do have something coming
Yeah.
on March 17th that Melissa's working on, so that's in the works. Thanks.
Thanks. Anything else? Okay, next, we will hear from the Community Access Panel with their annual report, which was an excellent report in our packet, and Paula's here to give a brief review.
I'd like to read the 19 pages of closely spaced.
Thank you.
We've increased our types of programs and the amount of programs this last year. More old-time movies, which are out of copyright. Some people really enjoy that. Our favorite program is the Yellow Springs Elementary School's Morning News. Really great. We've begun to experimentally post council meetings on YouTube within a few days, and we're experimenting with live broadcast of the council meetings on YouTube, and those are temporary. We're looking for more reliable commercial solutions for that, which are easier to handle. We'll want to work with a group on the village website to integrate those features into the website. Right now, you have to know that there's a cap.yso.com because it's not linked to the main page. That's where the videos are right now. Eventually, the council videos should be with the council and the planning commission and so on, probably. So we'll work with integrating the videos into the new website, which I think Brian is going to talk about. We now have high-speed internet connection, so now we can upload these videos to wherever they're going to be stored in minutes rather than days. Microsoft has quit support for the operating system for our 3 computers, so we've converted to Windows 7 up one step or two. Time Warner did a big switch on our location of our channel. We spent a little time converting the building over for that and some of our subscribers, and also the free sites in town which are part of our franchise, senior center, fire department, the schools, and so on. So we got them on upgraded so that they now can get Channel 5 again.
Good.
We're almost at critical mass on forming a producers group. The staff, Gina and I and a few others, do the council meetings, government meetings, but we don't go out and film all of the council and trust meetings and so on. We rely on the community to bring those in. We're having discussions with Antioch College because there are some Miller Fellows in a lot of these organizations, and we're working to coordinate these people in providing video for our station. It's good advertising for the for the organizations, good experience for the students, and more shows for the station. In our panel meetings, we've had discussions about increasing our services to council. Although we may not have the technical expertise, we could be the forum to bring in technical people to answer questions for council, much like Energy Commission does. Page 2. We're working with Miami Valley Educational Computer Association, which is a government agency that resides here in Yellow Springs. If you don't know, they're one of our major employers in providing the internet service. They also provide service for Antioch College, Antioch Midwest, the Yellow Springs school system, and some others. Our cable franchise runs out this year. The Time Warner has chosen to go with the state franchise, but apparently our funding will continue. Melissa has pretty good confidence that you can count on the about $40,000 a year coming in from Time Warner. I mentioned the Miller Fellows. We have one at the camera right there. What else? Okay, that's pretty much page 2. The rest are the rules and procedures for the panel. It's my understanding that not only council, but all of its subsidiaries are required by law to approve their rules and procedures for their organization. So we include that in our packet. Also, the rules and procedures for the station, which is really how do you interface with the station. And my position description and Gene's program manager to show how we organize the station. And we're working on a position description for Leo so that when he applies for a job sometime, he'll have not only a position description to show, but also a employee evaluation to match it. And finally, in this packet is a proposed budget. This was approved in the last meeting of the advisory panel, but we've been working with Melissa through the period that the village budget has been prepared to make sure that we match. In the past, we proposed a budget in March or April, and the budget's prepared in November or December, and we're getting together on having the information more useful. There are 2 major expenditures in that budget. One is upgrade to the equipment. We just upgraded our controller, and now we can do better commercial announcements between programs. It will help load the videos to the internet. The computer upgrades, when this room is redone, if it is redone, we'll have some minor expenses in doing that. So this year we have some budgeted capital expenses, which shouldn't repeat after this year. They're very conservative, probably more than we'll need to spend. We also have an operating fund, and we usually run around $1,000 to $1,500 a year, supplies and whatever. We have put into that, at council's request, an estimate for a part-time paid station manager someday to get a placeholder for that if council decides to do that in the future. I'm not a candidate for that. I don't want to make it sound like I'm looking for a salary, but I'm 3/4 of a century old, and I'm not going to be a station manager forever. And I think it's wise to look for contingencies for that.
I just think it has to be stated how much time you spend as a complete volunteer on this station. And I've said, I've told you and Brian, I mean, it's really impossible to sustain. I mean, it's amazing that you and Gene and others have been so dedicated to this, and thank you. And I mean, at some point, it's,
Absolutely.
I know we're going to have to say goodbye to you, unfortunately. And then you take your month-long excursions, so, sailing excursions.
Okay. Any questions?
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I can't believe how much value we get, and, such a great example of, that community effort to make something really good happen. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Could we take a break? Is that allowed?
I guess we have been going for 2 hours, haven't we?
2 hours we're allowed. Actually, we can do it any time at the request of
Go
the
ahead.
council person.
So we'll take a 5-minute recess. Okay. We'll call the meeting back to order. Next item on the agenda. Next item on the agenda is the water sourcing discussion. I think it's possible that we really don't have much to discuss right now. I will ask Kent what the status is and what we're waiting for.
We're still waiting for information from Springfield about rates and contract terms and things that would have to change because we're projecting much smaller volumes of purchase
Okay.
from them. So it's all I mean, it'll cost a fixed amount of money for them to run a water line to the county line, and the figures they gave us earlier were based on 260 million gallons a year, and now it turns out it's going to be more like 200 million, so that makes a big difference.
I mean, and so the numbers I can understand, but there still are some, I would say more practical and some more values kind of related issues that we need to consider, that maybe we can start putting those together about, what is the value of having our own water system? Forgetting monetary, what is the inherent community value in having our own water system? Maybe providing a little bit of information on, are there other communities that have, things like, a couple things that came up at the last meeting. What do we do with those well fields? What will happen if we decide to go to Springfield? What will we do with those well fields? What will the legal and the legal structure be? How will we have to maintain them? I mean, I think John maybe brought up that they probably will have to be maintained. So, I feel like, at some point we've got to kind of pull this down, not just money-wise. We've got to kind of distill all of this information into some kind of a comparative document. So, the sooner the better.
And I think involving the community, especially in that piece.
The idea would be to bring it to council so that we can have a big community discussion. Yeah, at least as I understand it. Although there are some good people on water engineer people in town. And it might have been smart to involve them as a kind of task force from the start, but we got very far down the road before anybody really even thought about it.
And we also talked about that idea of a working session, kind of trying that out with this issue.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I do know speaking of community members, at least one person from YSI has expressed interest in being involved. So I think that would be a great resource.
What we might want to do is sort of just, I guess, kind of, if we know about people who have some expertise in this area, to invite them to come to the public meeting, try to make sure that that it's very much on their radar, and that would like them to be here.
Right, but I feel like that we do have to have a lot of the comparative data out there.
I agree, to make it worth their time.
As the start of the discussion, yeah.
I agree. I think you're.
Do we want to look at timeframes, or is that better to do at the end of the meeting when we're planning?
I guess I need to, a lot of this is really, I'm not sure how much involvement John is able to have. A lot of it's going to be Kent. I don't know if Joe's able to be involved in any of those sorts of things, like to investigate what would happen to the well fields, what we would do, what ongoing maintenance would be required, what would happen, this idea of mothballing the plant, what exactly does that mean? There's design build versus engineered, doing a design build plant versus hiring an engineer to do drawings and then bidding it out. I mean, those are all concepts and ideas I would like to explore more, that I think we need to discuss. RCAP, and I mean, my personal experience is pretty positive with design build. So I would like to see how that all fits in the scheme of things. How many contractors are there that build plants? How many are there other design build contractors besides Pioneer of Artesia, or Artesian of Pioneer? I guess that was. So. So I guess we'll talk about, when we go to agenda planning, we'll talk about whether we'll have this on the agenda, what Kent will have ready for then. So let's move on. We talked at the retreat, one of the things we did talk about at the retreat was the website, wanting to have an opportunity for it to be updated on an easier basis.
Can we have Joanne do the MOU?
Do the MOU first?
Just because she's been here for a while.
Absolutely. Sorry, Joanne.
Well, wait a second. Do you want to describe it, or are we just going to have Joanne come up and...
I think Joanne can.
Yeah, come on up and describe the process maybe take a couple minutes to talk about the project, just review the project.
So I'm Joanne Caputo, the project manager of the National Bronze Sculpture Symposium and Trail. So the symposium was held in 2 weeks in October, and now the sculptures that were created by our 4 national artists are in Indianapolis, and they actually will be a bronze pour. It's estimated Sunday the 16th. I'm looking at your calendar. Is it the 16th?
16th of
Yeah,
what date?
Of
Sunday is the
March, in
16th.
2
Yeah.
weeks? Yeah.
Yeah.
So weather permitting and all that, they'll be poured then and then finished, and they'll be back here by the end of April. And then Van Lane Construction, Todd will be installing in May, and we tentatively are planning a June 1st unveiling. So, and there are 4 artists, and so there are 4 sites that comprise the trail, and 3 of them are privately owned, and one of them is owned by the village, which we went through a process with earlier, and that would be in the Dayton Street low brick wall area. So we originally talked about some kind of installation on top of the wall or at the end caps, and then Brian said there's been some discussion about maybe using a little bit of ground in front of the brick wall, and I think so. That's what the mock-up I put in the material. I think the planning committee is pretty flexible about exactly, what's the best, and we need to know what's underneath and whatever you'll advise. So, and the other 3 sites are Mills Lawn, the front sidewalk area, and the Yellow Springs Credit Union, and the 4th site is the new Mills Hotel that will be constructed, be ready by 2015. Possibly, the site will be ready for the June 1st unveiling. It's all, there are a lot of factors involved, and we're just kind of playing it by ear with Jim Hammond. But the current driveway between that property and Alan Macbeth's place, that will be landscaped, and then a new driveway will be to the right of that. And that landscape corner right at the sidewalk will be, tentatively again, will be where the 3 sculptures are. So that was a new development, and worked out nicely. So we assigned contracts with the hotel owners and the credit union, and we're waiting to hear back from the schools. And so the 4th one is the village.
And this has gone before the Arts Commission?
Yeah, and the Arts Commission reviewed it, approved it. Actually, we got some feedback that they thought it protected the village's interests well, and so.
And I guess the other 2 pieces I think we need to have reviewed. I think that I had suggested that Kent and Jason, clearly Jason, this is the village staff, Jason will need to kind of approve the final site. I would like Kent involved in that. And then I think the MOU should probably be briefly reviewed. It's a pretty straightforward, it's a couple-page document, but I think it should be reviewed by the solicitor.
Right, and I understand, I think Joanne's going to set up a meeting with Kent and Jason, and then hopefully Kent can then talk to Chris after that about the MOU.
Sounds good.
Great.
As far as the placement, I would, whether it be on pedestals in front of the wall or on the wall, I would leave that up to staff. I don't know how the rest of council feels.
Staff, and probably consult the businesses there about how the walls are used. That would,
the only other key issue is accessibility for children and people in wheelchairs.
Right.
So, I think if we go over there, once the weather,
if you get the weather nice, and
it gets
so
breaks.
you and a staff member could maybe go and talk to, is it kind of right in front of the coffee shop, or is it more
I think it is.
shop?
Well, it's import, it's really that whole, it
Yeah.
would be probably the new Chinese restaurant, Import House, and down to the coffee shop.
Yeah, it depends if they want to be clustered or kind of spread, or, I think there's a lot of flexibility. So just getting everyone's the right heads together and make the decision.
Yeah.
So Ken, I will email you.
Okay.
And figure out a date. And soon before, or in the next week or 10 days.
Okay.
So, okay.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thanks
for all your work.
And this was an incredibly successful project. Thank you for the organizing and to the whole committee for all the work and to the funders. It was a great project.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, now Brian, one of the things we did talk about at the retreat as a council was that, we did feel that we needed updates and improvements to the website, and it needed to be a little bit easier for staff to do the updates, so it could be more quick, done in a more timely manner when things come up. So Brian took that on as a project.
Yeah, and so, and this was, I really did pick up with the eGov strategy, which was something that Laura started a year ago. And I know the proposal was a bit long, so in the packet I did try to pull out the essential pages, but it's all there to read. I guess some of the things that I think are really persuasive about moving in this direction are, we talked about this at our retreat, that there are delays and other issues with updating the website, and in fact, anyone that's looked closely at it knows there are still a lot of things that aren't fixed. And this solution allows, someone with no tech savvy to handle the updates. And I actually went through a tutorial this morning, and it was pretty cool because we were online and he was showing me everything. So very user-friendly, very easy to update. Some of the things that we would be able to do is create the agendas, through the website, and we can link the documents that are related to each topic in that manner. So instead of creating this long PDF that Marianne was just talking about, it's all associated with the pieces that we're discussing. So it's truly a solution where we could go paperless. And he did mention to me a lot of municipalities have saved $700 a year just on printing. So I think that's something that's interesting for us to think about. More than that, with some of the changes that happened with the bad winter, because our meetings changed, we really did need that sort of instantaneous ability. And this is something we'd be able to do. Beyond that, there's a considerable cost savings in terms of just our monthly fees that we're paying now. Those would be at least halved once we get it going. And so I think that's a really important aspect of this. The other thing is it allows, Paul kind of referred to this in his report, instead of having these sub-sites that aren't really identifiable, everything's integrated into the website. So we can have a police piece, we can have the community access, all of that. It's totally set up so we can turn on other applications if we develop it and get more sophisticated. So live streaming, for example, if we move in that direction, they have an app that we can turn on for that anytime. So I really like those aspects. One thing that was updated in this is I think we're pretty interested in the ability for online payments for utilities. And the basic tool will add no cost. So that was not included in this proposal, but he just sent an updated one that I sent to Judy. And for free, we can have the basic tool, which allows people to go in. It also includes the service fee for credit cards. It's something like 2.5% or something. So we can have that as well. If we want something more sophisticated and customized, there is a cost to that, but it seems to have all the pieces that we're looking for.
What's our total, what would our total annual savings be, just on the maintenance?
So I guess I think I mentioned it here, right? Right now it's it's $476 and some change a month, and this would go down to $224 and some change a month.
And does that $476, that includes updates? Does that also include the server?
The hosting.
The hosting?
Yeah.
Hosting,
Because
okay.
one thing is, we do, with the eGov solution, need to use their hosting. That's part of how they keep it cheaper. They have the firewall. I mentioned here, they serve over 400 municipalities.
Did you give us a copy of that?
It was in the packet, but
It's not in the electronic packet, I don't think. Is it? Where is it in the, is it after that letter?
Here it is. I don't know, but it was in the electronic packet. We had to remove some blank pages. I remember doing it, so it's there.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I did include here are some examples of where it's being used. And I kind of like the other thing, too, that it's ADA compliant. So, you know, they're thinking about those issues as well. I mean, it's a great solution, and it's for local governments, and it's all about keeping costs down and making it easy for staff. And that was the other thing that was important to me, is that they have a model that helps facilitate that changeover, understanding how demanding, you know, a village staff day-to-day is, so.
And I didn't quite follow you. The hosting then will continue to be through Servlet, or the hosting is?
The hosting will be
Through eGov.
through eGov.
Okay.
Yeah, that's they don't have another option there. But what we would, you know, still be using Servlet for our, you know, maintaining our computers and things like that, and we would still want them to set up the email boxes that they talked about. So this website will point to those, but that, you know, there would be a few things like that that we would still.
I saw that they include the design in the fee to set up the website. I know that something that I had discussed with Laura was maybe having some local folks look at the design so that it didn't become cookie cutter. I mean, what I tend to see happen with a lot of those websites that one company does a number of them is they get very cookie cutter-ish.
Right.
And I'd like it to be pretty distinctive.
Right.
I did go to two of the cities. I went to Key West and Upper Arlington.
On their websites or to visit?
Well, what he hasn't closed?
She's just been traveling all over.
I know.
Las Vegas and Key West. But I was impressed. I thought it was easy to use. It had a lot of information, very easy to use.
Right.
But I think they were pretty similar. The homepage had rotating photographs from the community. And then when you would go to anything else, it was pretty much text, I think, what I saw. But very readable.
And when I read the initial proposal, my understanding is that it was already established that they're doing sort of the basic level design that they can then work with us to, you know, customize more through our own option. So, so I believe that number's contemplated in here, but I can double check about that. But I think this is just sort of rudimentary, like getting the website together.
What was missing from online was just this page. This page is not in the online packet.
I mean, I've been wanting this for a long time. I know, you know, unfortunately, I don't think it's something we put in the budget. It's, you know, it's what a probably total maybe about a $15,000 investment just in the website, right? Just to
Yeah, so for them, it's 13 to get it all set up. It will take probably about 4 months just to work through the whole process. And part of that, I think, is keeping in mind that, you know, we're not going to dedicate a staff person to doing this 24, you know, every day. And then after that, it's the $2,600 a month, a year maintenance.
Okay.
So.
So we will see those ongoing savings. I mean, at some point, it will pay for itself.
Right, for sure. And, I mean, I have to believe, having talked to some of our staff, that the savings in terms of time and hassle are going to be really important there as well.
I do have to say about our current website that, you know, it was built, I kind of assume, for free by Servlet. Those folks have been maintaining it. They've been charging us, yes, but the condition of our website is essentially of our own doing. I mean, we're not, they're doing the quick updates that Judy sends them and that other staff members, but we're not sending them, major overhauls to say, okay, redo this page or add this section or do this. So, it's part of the issue of just having a staff member able to do that, able to provide that level of content. So, I mean, we've been served quite well by them. I think they're moving a little bit out of the maintenance, the web maintenance and web development arena, and I think see this as probably a direction that they're supportive of us going.
Yeah, and
So-
I'm glad you brought that up, because Ken and I did meet with Bruce Cornett, and he liked the idea of us being able to, do the basic maintenance on our own. One problem with, the proprietary website we have is it doesn't really have a content management system that is user-friendly.
Right.
So it would not really be possible for a staff member to get in there without really messing up the website. So this is designed to basically cut and paste, click, really easy.
Okay. Do we need a vote or anything, or will this come for a resolution since it's 13,000? How does that?
I guess it could.
I think it's probably not a bad idea. And I guess the other issue is that, I mean, there will be some pretty significant decisions. I mean, there will be design decisions, there will be those kinds. How are we planning on making those kinds of decisions?
I would be happy with either a committee of council. Maybe I'm sort of looking at you and Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely like to be involved.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to kind of facilitate, maybe the technical side, and I'll leave design to your expertise.
Sounds good. Okay. So we'll bring a resolution to the next meeting. Thank you. We ready to move on? Any comments from citizens about that issue? Moving on to the manager's report. Kent, anything you'd like to report?
Just a couple of things. I mentioned that there might be a glitch with the utility bills. It didn't materialize, so that's fine. A problem that didn't happen. 4 companies have requested a bid package for the pool management, and we have 2 bids already. So they're due by Thursday, so there's quite a bit of interest in that. And then the last thing is the new zoning code is apparently creating some unexpected problems with reuse of the Creative Memories building. So when Planning Commission meets a week from tonight, we're going to talk about the possibilities of amending the zoning. And since we've already talked about possibly changing zoning for the CBE site, and they're adjacent, then we may look at it as one package.
So Kent, does that mean that then the CBE site would be considered, again, for mixed commerce rather than I-1?
Well, Steve Anderson, the county planner, did a side-by-side analysis of I-1, education institution, commercial, mixed commerce, several different options, so we could look at them side by side. And I'll get that to council, but I'm also going to share it with Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Is that it?
That's all I have.
Thank you. Judy?
I didn't even do a clerk report. I was just a little swamped, so it was busy.
Moving on to future agenda items. The next meeting, we will have the second reading of the budget. We will have the resolution for the website.
The rate increase.
The rate increase, second reading for the rate increase. We know we will have an executive session with Doug Plunkett from Management Partners to review the resumes we have from the village manager search. At some point in time, we will have this ordinance about returning the easement at Glen Helen. Someday we will have that.
Still working on that, yeah.
And I think the next 3, Planning Commission Annual Report, Energy Board Annual Report, Library Commission, are placeholders if those of you who are the liaison for those commissions will
Ride.
will go to your commissions and ask.
Crack the whip.
Yes, for those reports. We'll get them in. Do you think anybody can commit to the next meeting?
I've sent out an email to those folks asking if they, in fact, I'm saying, well, pick one.
Okay.
March 17th or April 3rd.
Okay.
Whatever that date in April 7th. And I haven't heard back from anybody yet, but
Are we planning to have the Public Art Commission do one? I mean, they only had one meeting last year.
Yeah, it seems.
I don't see the point.
Okay, I don't either.
Just annex that into this year's report.
Sounds good.
Judy, let's see, the first meeting in April is, see, because the library meets every other month, and they didn't meet
you're right.
in February, so they won't meet again until April.
And they'll meet on April 1st, actually. If it's possible for your.
Oh, the first is on the, when they meet, on Wednesday? What day do they meet again?
Tuesday, first Tuesday of every even month.
Okay.
And we don't meet till the 7th.
And we don't meet till the 7th, okay.
So you
if
could
they
be.
have the heads up to prepare something and you're able to approve it then on the first, we'd be in good
Okay.
shape.
Well, if she's gotten your email, then. Okay.
I mean, the Energy Board is, well, Energy Board and Planning Commission both are, have very good minutes, but, so we'll just see. I mean, if we don't, I think we're going to have a pretty busy agenda. And then, should we put the water discussion back? I mean, Kent, do you, I mean, I don't want to keep putting it on the agenda if we don't have anything to report. Do you anticipate that you could have some information together at that point?
I'll know by the time we do agenda planning.
Okay.
I mean, it's either for the next one or the next one.
Right.
Karen, did you want to have the financial comparison before we talked about the sort of pros and cons of, and value issues about having our own plant and what that would mean?
I mean, I guess it's, I don't know if we need to have it in pieces. I mean, if it makes much discussion or sense to have the discussion in pieces, but at least to start to gather the information. So, well, I just put water discussion a question mark. So, I see that our solicitor has arrived. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of consideration of appointment and employment of a public employee or official and discussion of pending court action. So moved.
Second.
Judy?
Winthrop.
Yes.
Asplund.
Yep.
Sims.
Yes.
Housh.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Happy trails, y'all.
Thank you.